The older I've gotten, the more I realize that it's really important to understand what brands you allow yourself to have. And when you say that you hate something, I think it's important from like an introspection level to understand why you hate something.
The success of your life is determined by the grade, like whether you have an A or B or A plus, and the way how the Korea, the education system works. And I was like kind of tired of it and I just let it go.
If you're an Asian in America,
Right.
you are kept to the standard of you got to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer.
Failure is not always going to end up failing your life, but you should take it as a chance as redemption and to better yourself.
When these people who are incredibly talented, incredibly intelligent, immigrated to America, Americans got to claim the success of them coming here because they got to fulfill the American dream. So you get to a place where you realize that hard work is really the key. When did you start understanding that principle?
All right, crew. Today's guest is someone who brings both deep technical expertise and a passion for lifting others up in the cybersecurity space. Kyu Lee is a cybersecurity solutions architect at Cisco, where she's focused on designing and implementing secure systems that help organizations stay resilient in the face of evolving threats. With a background as both a SOC analyst and a solutions architect, she knows what it takes to protect systems from the ground up. Her credentials, let's just say they speak for themselves. Kyu holds a master's in information security engineering from the SANS Institute of Technology, 12 GIAC certifications, Security Plus, and CISSP. She's the real deal. But what makes Kyu stand out even more is her commitment to mentoring and giving back to the cybersecurity community. She's passionate about helping others break into the field, grow their skills, and thrive in a space that can sometimes feel overwhelming to navigate. Whether she's architecting secure environments or guiding the next wave of cyber professionals, Kyu is all about impact. And today we get to learn from her journey. Let's give a warm welcome to Kyu Lee on KO's Launchpad.
Kyu, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for coming out. It's actually really, really beautiful.
Yeah, very special place for me.
It is a special place.
Right.
Do you want to share why this is a special place?
Yeah, so basically, first time I came to North Carolina, this place was a place where I get to be doing the cardio when the Cisco gym is closed. And then this is like today, the place where I come, to distress myself because I think it's important with the job that we have. Thankfully, it's a work from home, but you get to sit on the chair forever. And I would like to just get out and then breathe the nature and smell it and enjoy the, the music, de-stress myself. And then this is a place where I hung out with my boyfriend at the time, now husband, and then he proposed to me over here. So overall, very special place.
I love that. I love that. So I didn't know that when I came here.
Right.
I thought this was just another lake property that was beautiful.
Right.
And when you told me that, it made me feel like I got a piece of some of that special energy. So thank you for sharing
Introduction to my special part of my life. Yes.
Oh, I love that. I love
Right.
that. So Kyu, where you're at in your career as a cybersecurity architect at Cisco, doing really, really incredible work. Like these are roles that aren't held down by just normal people. You need to have a background. You need to have a history, likely in technology and cybersecurity. But it's really an aggregation of a ton of like habits that you've built over time. And what I'd love to unpack is like, what was it like growing up as Kyu? And what were the things that led you to technology and into cybersecurity? And eventually, how did you get to a place where now you can absolutely crush it at Cisco with so many GIAC certifications, which are world renowned, that a lot of people, me included, would look at your resume and go, damn, that's a stacked resume. So if you don't mind sharing, like, where did you end up growing up?
So I was first born in Korea, and then I came here when I was 8th grade, 9th grade. So I wasn't perfect in English. Obviously, have some accents still now. And the reason that I came here is because my parents thought that I'll be a loser because I actually didn't care about studying at all. Like
back then?
Yeah, back then in like a middle school in Korea, because it's like very competitive and it's like the success of your life is determined by the grade, like whether you have an A or B or A plus, and the way how the Korea the education system works. And I was like kind of tired of it and I just let it go. And then my parents are like, you know what, America is the land of dream, where you can probably start over. So I came and my family followed. And that's where I actually started appreciating this freedom that American education, that provides, like where I can excel when I want to, and I can study like without the pressure from like, the teachers and the peers and I can study without having to go to like maybe 5 extra curriculum, the after schools. So from there, I learned to be a little bit more responsible and value the education. Then I did go to the Georgia Tech, thankfully, because I lived in Georgia at the time for 10 years. And then that's where I slipped again, where I was like, oh, the first year freshman, I'm going to get all A's. And then the sophomore year, that's where I was like, oh, I have my first boyfriend and then I don't care about anything. And then after I tasted my failure, this is where I think that it is very important to acknowledge that failure is not always going to end up failing your life, but you should take it as a chance as redemption and to better yourself. So that's where I came across this Army ROTC program at Georgia Tech, attended the ROTC like a camp to whether or not I want to be an officer in the Army after graduating to college. And that's where I kind of tasted that, okay, this is what the hard work is about. And it's blood, sweat, and all physical, emotional, and mental, the strength that takes it to be successful. And I realized that, hey, you know what? Coming from the immigrations family, it can be very tough. You can be hungry, and it's not always a luxury life. So that's where I was like, you know what? I don't want to be hungry like my parents' generation is, and I need to do something. So that's where I decided that I'm gonna work hard. I don't know what my end goal is after graduating Georgia Tech. But I will continue on what I started. And then I will also continue on the Army ROTC program that I started without really thinking much.
So I've got a few questions about your journey leading up to moving to Georgia. I'm also kind of curious, what were some of the most stark differences, like culturally even, between South Korea and Georgia? In
America, you do not really have to be engineer or doctors or lawyers, although Asian culture will still carry on wherever you are at. That's how I became an engineer. But the pressure is a little bit different, is that you are considered literally a failure. In South Korea, if you do not go to, let's say, the top 3, the universities in South Korea, versus over here, you have so many opportunities. You can go to the, the 2-year, college. What is it called?
Community.
Community college, and then you can transfer, and then you can complete, or you can just do 2-year college and then continue on, or you don't even have to go to college to get some opportunities within the corporate or non-corporate and be successful. I've seen so many people who may not have a degree, but like are way smarter than I am. So I think the opportunity that presents based on the culture and the mindset in South Korea versus America is very different.
Do you think that a degree or the prestige of an institution where a degree is earned from is an honest reflection of someone's intelligence capacity?
I don't think so. But it's not the representations of someone's intelligence or the way how they can perform, but rather it's more like it's pursuing the continuing education is more of how persistent are you or how much effort do you put on. So that's why I'm still doing the master's degree, pursuing, almost about to be done. Not because I want to have the title, but more because I do not like to be complacent at where I am. So I don't think it reflects the intelligence, to answer your question.
I'd love to unpack that a little bit more. So you were mentioning how, like in earlier childhood, when you were around 9 or 10, that you didn't have an inclination towards studying. Like at what point specifically did you start to feel that turn, and what were some of the motivating factors behind that?
I think that's when I first came to America, the 8th grade. It's like when you immigrate to the new country and your parents actually gave up everything behind for the success of maybe the new dream of your family and the new opportunities for your children. You somehow have the responsibility. So it's like trying to meet the responsibility and feeling the new start, the beginning of your life. And the only thing that you can do as a student at the point is that, study. And
we are our children's wildest dreams. And I like how you brought up that portion about how if you're an Asian in America, you are kept to the standard of you got to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. And we actually unpacked this on one of our calls when we both still worked at Cisco together. I remember asking you, I was like, do you know where that stereotype comes from? Doctor, lawyer, engineer? And you were like, no, enlighten me. And I got this book recommendation from one of my best friends, Emmett. And the book is called Minor Feelings. And it unpacks actually a Korean American's experiences being an Asian in America. You're not quite white. You're definitely not black.
Right.
So there's these different standards that you're held to. And one of these standards that we're held to is professionally either being doctors, lawyers, or engineers, which as a kid is a pretty damn staggering task because you don't even understand what the path is to succeed in either three of those disciplines. And it's huge. It's staggering. Like for a 9-year-old to have that kind of pressure, they don't know it yet, but it's a huge, huge ask. So in the book, Minor Feelings, they ask, or they actually explain where that stereotype came from. And actually during World War II, the United States was very, very selective with which people from overseas, I'm talking East Asia, that they would allow into the country. One of the guiding principles behind who they would allow to immigrate to the States was their profession. So they had to be either a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. Otherwise, they wouldn't accept you from East Asia. So when these people who were incredibly talented, incredibly intelligent, immigrated to America, Americans got to claim the success of them coming here because they got to fulfill the American dream when really they would have been successful no matter where they were because that was who they were. It wasn't the fact that they were now Americans. So very interesting there. I think that's something I wish more Asian Americans understood.
Right. And I think that's something that I want to emphasize, even on my kids. I have 2 stepkids. Is that I tell them is that you don't have to be doctor, engineer, lawyers.
It'd be nice though.
Yeah, it was nice. But I want you to be a hard worker, have a good discipline and principle, and be able to be responsible, to yourself. So I think that's something that American culture emphasize. But engineer, lawyer, and doctor is just an option over here. I think you can be successful, whatever you decide to be if you're a hard worker. But
it's funny that these are all really high-paying disciplines and they command a lot of respect and prestige. But something that's really, really popular, especially in America, due to like capitalist society, is why not be a businessman or a businesswoman? That can be just as lucrative, if not way more lucrative than any of those other roles. So maybe it's the prestige aspect. I think if you introduce yourself as a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, depending on where you're at, that can be much more prestigious than saying I'm a business person. Now that I say that out loud, if I ever told anybody I was a business person, I'd be like,
ex-engineer,
ex-NASA.
Right.
So you get to a place where you realize that hard work is really the key. When did you start understanding that principle?
The very first moment that I really tasted what the hard work means is at that 1 month boot camp at the Army ROTC. It was during the summer, I think July. I mean, again, like I just randomly follow my friend who recently broke up with her boyfriend. And then she's like, I need something to do to get off my mind somewhere else. And I followed to the Army, the ROTC recruiter office, and they signed us up. And then my thing is that sometimes I just go with the flow and then do it. Without really thinking much about it. And then I tasted the real hard work, the military boot camp. And I mean, that's where I learned the principle and not giving up, be persistent. So hence the reason why I did not give up after going to that 1 month boot camp, although I had a chance of discontinuing. So hence the reason why I went on my journey and then commissioned as an officer. And then I went to the Cisco, hence carry the trait of not giving up and continue to pursue for the higher goal, and then became who I am today with the engineer role.
That is a huge butterfly effect of moments there, right? So do you think you would have pursued the military? Like if you could go back in time and pursue that route, knowing what you know now, you could talk to young Kyu and tell her, do or do not join the military, what would you tell her?
That one is a very difficult conversation. I will still encourage maybe if someone like who's watching the podcast or listening to it needs some refreshment, I would highly recommend attending some military boot camp. But the commissioning as an officer or enlisting in the military, that's a whole another responsibility. Now that I experienced it, not quite sure yet, because that's another whole level of second job. You know, second job, and it's a responsibility and willing to deploy, and sometimes putting friends and family behind. So I think that really depends on situations, but I would have totally still went to the boot camp to come to the Jesus moment. It's like, you need to wake up. You got to have a real taste of the hard work.
Yeah.
Right.
I hear very often that people join the military because they're just not straightened out quite yet. Or someone tells them, you know, you've messed up every possible other opportunity, or you need to get it in line. And for a lot of people, it works out. It straightens people out. It gives people a sense of purpose, a sense of organization. Like, why do you think the military is so effective at getting people to just start on a blank slate?
Well, first of all, like I mentioned, it could be a second job or it can be a primary job. So it gives you an opportunity, even if you have exhausted all the options in civilian side, just like you mentioned, right? But for those who are kind of in the kind of middle of nowhere, that kind of boosts your confidence that I can do anything if I went through this. If I went through this mentally and physically, I can probably step up and then do better. That's what happened to me. So I didn't choose to go to the active duty because I trusted that I could do better from that moment and then till the graduation, and, you know, trying to interview for multiple different companies, you know, by the time I graduate. Yeah, I mean, for me, I was like slipping through my GPA because I really didn't care. I had some depression going on at the time. And then after I went through the ROTC, I'm like, you know what? Depression, I can overcome this thing. This ROTC, the boot camp, really woke me up. And then that's where I was like, you know, sat on the desk and then kind of looked at what's at the stake. Is that, hey, at this stage, you know, my resume might not even pass through, you know, the recruiters. So I need to first you know, the work on going up my, you know, getting my GPA up and then building my resume, as in, you know, through the ROTC, that could be some unique the experience that you can put on the resume. Because I may lack a performance that I did in the previous years. And from there, you know, going some for, you know, other research opportunities within the college, and then went on internship and the co-op at Cisco. So
Wow, it sounds like it was so formative for you to having gone through that experience. And now that I listen to it, it reminds me of this concept of doing your long runs. So I started training for a marathon earlier this year, and gradually you want to ramp up how many miles you run. I'm not a runner. I personally hate running, especially long distance running. I tried track and field in high school, but I had a significant injury, and now to this day I still can't really sprint.
Knees.
It was actually my hip flexor that went out because I didn't stretch properly. And I was just like, yeah, let's go do full wind sprints with like absolutely cold. But I still wanted to stay out and stay active. So I did a little bit of cross country. I hated it, Q. I was like, oh, I do not like this. But the older I've gotten, the more I realize that it's really important to understand what brands you allow yourself to have. And when you say that you hate something, I think it's important from like an introspection level to understand why you hate something. Is it because you're just not good at it and you haven't applied the skills? Or is it because something just doesn't align with your lifestyle for the moment? And I've also been enamored with the idea of doing really big things because I just want to test my mettle and see just how high I can jump and how far I can run. So in this case, for marathons, on Saturdays, we have our longest runs of the week. So you might do like a 3, in the first few weeks of this training plan, you might do like a 3-mile run, a 4-mile run, 6-mile run during the Monday through Friday. And then Saturday, you try and run as long as you possibly can within reason. So maybe like a 10-mile run or a 12-mile run. And then gradually you add a mile throughout the weeks. So that way, eventually you get to a place where you can run 26 miles, which at the time I thought was almost impossible. So I had this coach in my ear, like a Nike Run Club Plus app, something like that.
I have that one too.
And he coaches you through it. And it's one of my long runs. And he tells you, I know that it hurts right now, but I want you to remember that the long runs make the short runs easier.
Mm-hmm.
I like running the long runs because it makes the short runs easier.
Mm-hmm.
And that quote has rang in my head because I think if you're someone who does the hard things, like ROTC, for example, it makes everything else in comparison seem much more doable. So I see a lot of alignment between, you know, your ROTC journey and me pushing myself through these grueling, like 22-mile runs, because it makes a small walk or even a half marathon seem like trivial.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and also one thing to add to that hate, you know, the hate something, the root cause analysis of the hate. I hate doing this and that. I tell my kids is that sometimes like you need to also see just because you hate it, you don't do it, that doesn't go by. It's like
That's a good
sometimes,
one.
yeah, sometimes you can let it go, but even though you hate it, when you actually look at the situation and you see that this is like a fundamental to be at least foundation of the success or foundations of who you want to become, you gotta suck it up. That's like a mentality that military teaches too. Suck it up.
Embrace the suck.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I've heard pretty often. So at what point in your life do you feel like you've got an inclination towards technology? Was this something you've always had or something you picked up along the way?
I mean, I've always been better at science and math. I guess the Asian brain. All the Asians. Yeah, I mean, so it was like kind of natural for me to consider whether like a doctor route or engineer based on the culture and the family pressure and, you know, just natural ability, inclination towards the science of math. And hence went into Georgia Tech. And actually, I first started as a network engineer, like an intern at Cisco. That was my very first internship, along with some other electrical engineering, like a research assistant at Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
It was just, I just went with the flow. Because sometimes like I feel like you do not have to have a grand reason of starting certain role or a certain job. It just, you gotta have some start and then go from there and explore what you like. And that's what happened. Like, you know, maybe your next questions on how I got into the cybersecurity is that I started as a network engineer. I actually reach out to several different people. You go volunteer on some, you know, the activity that the, you know, the company hosts for the new hire, and then you make connections. And then that person, you know, kind of tells you as a new hire, hey, if you go to this website or if you meet this person, there are certain roles like that. And you get to meet people. Oh, what's your role within the company? Yeah. So there are things that is so out of what you're doing every day. And then you actually have to have some courage of approaching and talk to the person. Hey, what is this about? Yeah. Can you give me an opportunity? I'm an intern and I'm gonna be graduating in, you know, this and that month, and I'm interested in, you know, this and that type of role. So that's how I ended up at the cybersecurity, which I think that it's very blessing because I know that not many people end up in the job from the very beginning of their career and really appreciate and liking and like have good compatibility. Yeah. Not hating the job. So yeah, I mean, that's how everything went on. Yeah. Yeah. So very fortunate that you got to go through your undergraduate program, found an internship at Cisco, and naturally through Cisco, you were able to navigate your career into the specialty that you're in now. Right. Gotcha. So how many roles have you had at Cisco? Technically, I started as a network engineer intern who worked in the lab. And then I went on to the cybersecurity analyst at the SOC. And then I went on to the system engineer, like a slash the, you know, the architects, the security architect role that I am on, except that the variations of the, even at the security architect, you can be responsible for the small business or the commercial or the enterprise. So yeah, I mean, practically like 3 roles. Yeah. So it's a good amount of exposure there. You get an internship role as a network engineer intern. And then after that, you get to work in the SOC. So that's sort of your touch of like cybersecurity. Right. And most people do recommend working as a security operations center analyst as their first role in cybersecurity because you get to touch multiple domains. And I'd love to unpack what your experience was. But first, I'd love to hear, like, if you could give advice to interns and tell them, hey, this is how you stand out, this is how you close a job, what would you tell them? As an intern, as I mentioned, it's very important that you actually get out of your daily intern duty. I mean, perform your duty, 100%. But on the time that you have, like, reach out to people, like they may not be relevant to where you're working.
Yeah.
And then find out like what other roles are there, and then talk to those people. And just by doing so, you are actually standing out from every other interns, like who are just doing what they get paid for, hourly base. And one thing that one of the manager or mentor that told me at the time is that you're too ambitious. Like, just by me actually talking to other people, reaching out and making connection. No, it's not that thing. It's like, I'm not sure why that's like being ambitious. It's about exploring outside of the small world that you are in. So that will be my advice. Like, get out of your shell and then explore.
You know, I find it very funny that you mentioned that, because when I was going through my own internship at Silicon Valley Bank, at the time I was going through this tech accelerator for young adults who don't have traditional educational backgrounds, who can get their foot in the door and actually reach these corporate internship positions and eventually network their way into like a full-time role. So that organization is called Year Up, and they placed me in a cybersecurity internship doing GRC, IT security audit work at Silicon Valley Bank. And the advice from Year Up and all the business professional teachers was, your network is your net worth. You need to go out there and you need to connect with as many people as you possibly can, because you don't know which one of these people might be the person who sort of unlocks this gateway for you. So that's what I did. I took that advice very seriously, and I went out and I tried to network with everybody. Q. I try to get on my my CISO's calendar, my director, all my managers and adjacent managers. I was having informational interviews all the time because I wanted to know what they did, and I wanted to know what they liked about their job and what sucked, honestly. And through that experience, I ended up having my lunch calendar completely booked out for 2 weeks. And my fellow interns would ask me like, "Hey, you want to go grab lunch today?" And I'm like, "I'm sorry, I got to meet with."
I got a business meeting.
But I was just taking this advice, and I had actually heard some feedback that I was too ambitious. And it didn't really sit well with me, because that was the advice that I'd heard. And I think now, in retrospect, I've never really liked being caged up in a box. Being told you can't do anything. So I love hearing that, because you just activated my neural pathways. I remember it. So thank you for the advice for the interns. What advice would you give to someone who wants to thrive as a SOC analyst or a cybersecurity analyst today?
So a quick thing is that we talk about the intern, but because I came through the traditional route, but I've also through the military, I've also come across the people who may not have gone through the traditional route, like you mentioned about those who want to have a corporate internship. For those, I would like to say that, don't be afraid to go for the contractor job at the SOC, because you're always in the need for the SOC as a contractor job.
Why is that?
Oh, it's a lot of turnover.
Burnout.
Burnout. It's a lot of tickets. But you know what? To your point, SOC is a perfect place for you to get the various exposure to many different types of cybersecurity attacks, or the different types of campaigns, or different types of logs, and you know how everything works, the tools work together. But if you have not gone through the traditional route where I came from, college internship and a corporate internship, it's perfectly fine. Go for the contractor job, get your experience, and I will highly recommend, like you mentioned, at the SOC, just like I mentioned, that's where you see everything come together. At my current role is to explain to the customer, designing the architecture of, hey, this is where you should place this type of solution, which does ABCD functionality to meet your business or the security, the goal, protection. Versus a security analyst is the one that's going to see everything, that all those solutions come together and provide you an information, and you to use your analytical brain to come to a conclusion and provide a consultation to the customer. So that provides a lot of confidence in trusting your judgment and learning from the, the very tier 3 or experience, the investigators of how their thought process work. So I think it's more open process where everybody are forced to work together and be able to see the higher experience, the people's work and grow. very fast.
Yeah, absolutely. I think ticket volume is absolutely huge. The SOC can be a very unforgiving place.
Right.
It can be.
Yeah.
But there's also third shift, like working on night shift as you get ramped up and you get used to ticket volume, as you get acclimated with tools. I think that's the other component too, is that there's a lot of tools that you need to learn how to use.
Right.
But once you learn how to use a subset of tools, the core functionality a lot of the time is pretty similar. It's only when I think you get to the enterprise level where you need a very granular control that's only available with one vendor is where things become pretty unique. But for the most part, if you know how to use one EDR, it's going to protect and function in a similar way to the other top EDR vendors. So I know EDR vendors don't want to hear that. We're all unique. We're all special.
Right.
100% MITRE. But the reality is, if you understand how one EDR works, you can use that in similar capacity to pick up how another EDR works.
Right.
But EDR isn't the whole story. I'd love to hear from your perspective, like what it was like your first year as a SOC analyst.
I work like a horse, like a mad horse. That's again, like going a little bit back to how we got the feedback you're too ambitious or something, is that even before you get on the calendar of someone like a networking as an intern or the new hire, is that you need to prove yourself that you're a very hard worker. You are like 100% like on the top notch person who can do your job, then go reach out to other people. So that one I want to touch on. And as the first year and as an intern, I quickly became, I saw your story too, is that you quickly became the trainer for the new hires. And that's how I became too, is that because I work like a horse and continuously try to find something that I can contribute to the organization. So that's how I kept finding stuff for me to do and add the value. So yeah, that was my first year in the SOC. And then I think by then, at the 1 year mark as a new hire at the SOC, that's where I kind of felt like, maybe it's time for me to reach out outside of the SOC analyst role and then look what's available. And I started talking to the security architect, my current role, the people, hey, how's it like? What's your experience?
Yeah.
Then I moved on.
Gotcha. So Kyu, what I'd love to hear about is how you were able to navigate what that next step looked like for you as a SOC analyst. Because some SOC analysts, they're usually thinking, I'm either going to go to tier 3, I might specialize in like threat intelligence, even detection engineering potentially, which is much, much more advanced than just threat intelligence. I can go into IR, digital forensics, and on the other side of the fence, everybody wants to be a hacker because it's a very sexy job to be a pen tester. So I'd love to hear I'd love to hear how you navigated that next step in your career after you initially started as a SOC analyst.
Well, first of all, I don't think none of us know what's the perfect next step is.
True.
And I've seen even the group that I've been part of, they're there still, like for 7 years, like or 8 years. I mean, nothing bad. But important thing is that it's very important outside of where you are at, whether it's a SOC or not, like you really need to have open eyes of what's available. So that kind of gives you a sense on, oh, maybe that sounds interesting. Then you start poking around and then ping the random people that maybe someone has a connection with, and then determine the next path. For me, luckily, there was someone who had connections with the cybersecurity architect. And then actually, before I interviewed for the Cisco security analyst at the SOC, I interviewed for various different the roles inside and outside of the Cisco. So I knew that security architect was an option. So that's why I went on and pursue, like, can I have some conversations with you? And then went on. So, but yeah, I mean, even if it were not the security architect, there are so many different roles that you can do, PCERT or, the hacker or consultations outside of Cisco. So just important to just look up. Like if you don't know what roles are out there, like even Cisco internal just job posting, just scroll through.
That's good. That's good. I think something that's really hard, especially for folks who are a little bit younger in career, to remember is that like we are in charge of our own destiny.
Right.
Nobody is ever going to want something more for us than we need to have it for ourselves. And for a lot of our lives, we spend this time like getting like coddled or even groomed, and then all of a sudden you're in college, and maybe you're on your own then, or then you get earlier in career. Maybe you're on your own then. What's important is to stay curious, right? Like you mentioned, go out there and actually find out what's capable for you. This is reminding me about what we talked about earlier. Like, I hate the idea of feeling like I don't have many options.
Right.
Like, one of my favorite quotes I've heard recently is that sadness is the result of feeling like you don't have any options. And I've been sitting with that, and I realized that that's very, very true. If you don't have many options, you feel locked in, or you get stuck in the rut of things, then it just sucks to be there. So I'm curious to hear from you if you ever feel like you are getting complacent, because I remember you mentioned that you don't like ever being complacent, which I agree.
Right.
How do you get yourself to break out of that?
So my manager actually told me that, Q, you need to slow down like multiple times, because I actually find myself continuously something that I can do. So for example, I mean, I think that's very, very key factor for any new in career, the people, whether they're currently a SOC analyst or not, like they have the job A right now and looking for another one. In the meantime that you have, like you need to look for, like the easiest thing that you can do is pursue certification. I mean, easiest thing, like you
Easiest.
easiest. Like you just gotta be a little bit miserable and like, you know, and study for it and spend a little bit of money if the company doesn't, you know, pay for it. The easiest place will be the Security Plus because that's affordable, or the Cisco certification. But that's how I continue to pursue, you know, the next step improvement. And the one thing is that I've seen, actually you interview Mike
McPhee?
Yeah. One thing that really hit me really hard is that even he has imposter syndrome. And that really shocked me. And you look at his resume, his like MBA, CCIE, and the GSC, and Masters in Engineering, and it's like all the GIAC certification. And I'm like, you feel imposter syndrome? That's crazy, because I have a severe imposter syndrome. I oftentimes tell my husband, it's like, dude, I feel so stupid. It's like, and he's like, oh, Q, you know, all your like peers appreciate your work and nobody tells you you're stupid. It's like, it doesn't matter. It's about how I feel.
That's true.
Right. It's about how I feel, and that I know that I can do better. And I know that there are things that I can improve myself and how to do it on technology footprint. And even like also have an open mind about, it's like, don't be really stuck with the one goal of I'm an engineer now and then I'll be engineer forever. That you need to continuously explore the new field as well. So my plan right now is that maybe eventually I will pursue maybe leadership course or the MBA in the future, and then take some, you know, the opportunity to tap my fingers into that, just because I have a technical, you know, the experience, but you never know what will happen in the future. Yeah. So it's like kind of building up some ammunition right now, so that you can open the door of wherever you want to go in the future. That's huge. So there's a lot to unpack there.
Right. I'm thinking about Mike. So I recently interviewed him, and I actually knew about him like for many years. When I was first earning my GIAC cert, you earn one, and then you're like, why don't you do another one, and then another one. And at the time, the NASA SOC was very competitive, so we just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. We'd have GSEC, GCIH, GCIA, GCFA. Before we knew it, like we were trained and ready to become Tier 3 analysts within like 2 years, which is an insane ramp time, considering the body of knowledge that you need to have. But we're looking at people on LinkedIn who have the most GIAC certifications. And at that point, you can't even list them all. You just do GIAC X, the amount of certifications you have. Like,
so
it's
funny.
so cool to say GIAC X, like 2, 3, 5, 17 for some people. I think you might be 17.
Yeah, I have 17 certification. Out of it, I think it's 13 or 14 that I have from GIAC.
Yeah, each one of those certifications can be around like $10,000.
Right.
So it's a lot of investment that you've put into your own education. And to wrap things up with Mike, I asked him, you have all these degrees, all these certifications. Like, what percent of the body of knowledge of cybersecurity do you feel like you understand?
Mm-hmm.
He said 1%.
Oh dear, I thought 5. I thought he'll say 5.
Granted, Mike is a very humble guy.
Right.
But if I were to ask you the same question, Q, like, given the knowledge that you have, given that you've been consistently committed to education, to this field, like, what percent of the body of cybersecurity knowledge do you feel like you understand?
Oh, just because Mike said 1%, I feel bad about saying 5%, but definitely less than 10% because the cybersecurity is a field where it continuously like change.
Mhm.
It's so dynamic, and that's part of the advantage of like for all these young, the people who are interested in cybersecurity.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, you'll probably have a lesser chance of getting laid off right? Because it's so dynamic and it's on demand because it changes. But one important thing is that depends on what your role is, the type of certifications that you have achieved, if you do not practice it, you forget.
Yeah.
So, but I put the meaning on studying and achieving those certifications by I get to have an exposure on these knowledges. I may not retain everything that I've studied for and have gotten the certifications for, but now I have a broader spectrum of knowledge that I
Yes.
can apply.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially in a role where you are customer facing and you get to interface with people at varying levels of engineering and technical acumen. Like, you've got chief architects at large enterprise customers who have been doing this for decades, and they understand how to rip packets apart to the nth degree. And you got to speak to them at this level of knowledge. Then moving up the chain to management, you got your manager, then you got your director, then you have your VP, SVP, and then CIO even. And you're speaking to these leaders, and oftentimes the technical knowledge begins to thin out
Right.
the higher you go. So you need to be able to communicate at a level that they each understand and be competent. Otherwise, you could like lose, or you could increase the risk of losing that sale,
Right.
which we never want to do.
All right.
So for me, taking the Forensics 508 class, that was probably the most impactful certification I've ever taken in my life in terms of my ability to communicate advanced threats, because the threat life cycle is repeatable. Like, threat actors aren't going to innovate if what has always worked in the past still continues to work.
Except AI.
Except AI.
Right. You're right.
Besides that, I think 504 was really incredible just because I finally got exposure to the offensive side and the defensive side. So I'm curious to hear from you, which one of your certifications do you feel like has had the most impact on your own professional career?
I will say the very first one, my GCIA, the 503.
That was your first one?
Yes. Okay. Listen, this is how I started.
That's crazy.
Okay. This might kind of come along with what I mentioned earlier is that number one, I don't like to be told that I can't do it. So a lot of people that actually, I took it at the very beginning of my new hire. Like, I had zero experience on the cybersecurity, but then I heard that this tier 2 and tier 3, they do this GCIN and just got it. And I'm like, you know what? If they can do it, I can do it. I had the mindset, and I still have the mindset, is that I think that's very healthy mindset for you to keep trying for achieving a higher goal. So that was my very first one. And everybody told me I'm crazy. Thankfully, I passed. But that's when I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I think for context, GCIA is an advanced intrusion analysis certification that you don't really take until maybe your second to even fourth year having worked in the SOC.
Right.
Very technical.
Right.
You need to learn how to read hex, utilize various tools to inspect PCAP like T-Shark. And there's also like a tad bit of like machine learning modeling in there. And I remember Q, when I was taking the machine learning portion of that class, I was like,
it was miserable. Yeah.
my brain was pudding. So that was your first one.
Yeah.
Wow, that's actually incredible.
6 months into, I think, cybersecurity. But again, if you put your mind into it and you're dedicated to it, there's nothing you cannot do.
That's
like,
so
that's
true.
My mindset.
You're unstoppable.
Right.
The only thing between you and your goals is effort and time.
Yes.
How much effort usually correlates to less time, as long as you're intelligent with that.
That kind of goes along with like recently because of my pregnancy. I had this like all this timeline that I had to set up is that, hey, I have this like certain certifications that I have to finish as part of the master's program and certain one that I got it for free from the Army and CISSP. It's not, I had to pay out of the pocket, but I knew that if I have a baby, I'm not going to have a time to study for it. So I ended up having to test for 3 certifications in 1 month. That was very miserable, but it kind of goes along with the theme is that there's nothing I cannot do if I'm determined to do it. So every night, the effort and the time that you mentioned is that every night, while my husband is like, maybe watching some comic, the shopping list, and my kids are having fun, I'm on the couch and reading books and, listening to the videos and everything, taking notes. But, that's a sacrifice that you got to make. Suck it up. You might hate it. Going back to the very beginning of the conversation, suck it up.
Embrace the suck. Wow,
Right.
that's incredible.
Right.
So I have to ask, if you got 13, 14 GIAC certifications, what are some study tips that you would recommend now? Or what is your general approach to studying and passing these exams? Because it can be very, very nerve-wracking to take these exams and worry that if you fail, you might lose out on thousands of dollars.
Right. I mean, it's the same for me when it comes to testing or even the interview with the people is don't get nervous. Like if you get nervous sometimes like that, you might actually perform lesser than what you may be able to do. So, and also in order not to be nervous, you got to build some muscle memory, whether it's for studying or communicating with other people or work.
Yeah.
So for SANS specifically, I'm more of a reader kind of a style. I know that many other people are different. Some people like to hear the, the MP3, the files and audio kind of a type of people. For me, I like to read and then I like to highlight, the things, and I like to make my own notes. For SANS specifically, everybody might agree index is super important.
Huge.
Oh yeah, huge, because there's absolutely no way that you're going to remember everything. And that's probably why CISSP was a little bit challenging to prepare for it, because you cannot have an index where you just got to memorize everything or understand. But SANS, I would think that it's actually easier to prepare for SANS exam than CISSP, in my opinion.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Because there's that level of anxiety that you have with CISSP because like it's mile wide, inch thick.
Yeah.
And it covers so many different domains, and you need to validate whether you have enough domain knowledge, or at least like the ability to interpret these questions and understand if I have these 4 answers and 3 of them seem right and 2 of them definitely seem right, how do I distinguish between the right one?
Has to be here, not on the index.
Exactly.
Right.
Do they have adaptive scoring for your CISSP?
Yes. Yeah.
Gotcha. So for those who don't know, for CISSP, if you crushed it, you hit question number 100 and then you just pass immediately, right? But if you get to question 101, that means the adaptive portion takes over and they keep asking more questions. So it kind of becomes like nerve-wracking. And at any moment between question 100 and a few dozen more questions after that, the test can end. Whereas for the GIAC certification, you typically have, I think like
75 questions usually.
Yeah, depending on the exam, something like 75 questions. And then also depending on the course, you have like a practical where you need to...
Lab, cyber lab, yeah.
Exactly. And at least there you can depend on like the quality of your index. Do you have any tips on how to build a really great index considering you've got 13 GIAC certifications?
Definitely, I use a Microsoft like an Excel by the book, and then I have this like a column where it's obviously the page number, and then the other one is a topic, and you got to be very good with the topic, like how you word it. Like for example, it can be like a bro logs, different type of HTTP, the logs, bro logs, like a file. So you got to have some common theme on when you name the similar topic, so that you can go back to it when you're in like urgency of trying to get the answer while taking the exam. And then for me, I put everything, the details that I can possibly have on that index, like on that context section. Some people, when I'm in the rush, I don't put as much details, but I prefer that way because as I'm typing and as I'm writing, it goes through my brain like a learning cycle.
Yeah. You're like activating neural pathways.
Yeah.
I think I read somewhere that you can increase your learning capacity, or like at least the retention of what you're learning, if you read it and you listen to it at the same time, which is really difficult, really difficult. You have all these certifications and you've amassed this body of knowledge. How much of these certifications did you pay for out of your own wallet?
So GCIA was the first one sponsored by Cisco. I think part of it, recently I know that I spent for CISSP and between some SANS certifications costs, like maybe 2,000 to 3,000 just on the exam itself.
Yeah.
But I know that it may be too much for people who are starting an early career. Hence the reason why I think you should, if you do not have any certifications, start with the Security Plus.
Yeah.
And then honestly, as I was studying for the CISSP, there's so much overlap with the Security Plus, except that between the Security Plus and CISSP, except CISSP, as I was taking the exam, you can answer a good amount of questions based on your experience. So I understand when CISSP mentioned on their ISC score, you know, the website, that you need to have a certain number of the years.
Yeah.
Because even if you may not have memorized perfectly what the domain or the topic is about, you can answer based on your experience. But I would say that start with the Security Plus, and if you're super ambitious and you have the courage to achieve or higher, then go next to the CISSP, I think.
Yeah, that's an excellent recommendation. And I actually followed exactly that. So in another life, I was a restaurant manager, and I thought I was going to be the next CEO of Chipotle one day. When I discovered cybersecurity, actually by hearing about the Stuxnet worm on Reddit, threw myself into the field, and I've never stopped learning ever since. From there, I was thinking about how I could transition into cybersecurity. And I go through the accelerated program at year up. I get placed at Silicon Valley Bank, but I don't get renewed, or I don't get my contract extended because there's no headcount available for that role. So I was in a really tough place, Q. I sent out like 300 job applications. I didn't have any college degree. I didn't have any certifications at all. I was just starting to study for Security Plus. And I finally get a couple calls back from a few places. 300 job applications, only a few people are calling me back. One of them was a government contractor. So like you mentioned before, first role in cybersecurity, if you can get a clearance, get that government contractor role, because it's so hard to find people.
Government like Security Plus.
Yeah, they love Security Plus.
Yes.
So I go through the interview process, and it's for a government contractor named ASRC Federal. I thought I was going to work in an MSSP or be contracted to work out at different facilities, but I noticed the address of the job rec was at Moffett Field, which was Ames Research Center, which is NASA. And I didn't know until the third interview that I would actually be working at NASA. I remember the recruiter told me, yeah, by the way, when you're doing contract work for NASA, and I had to mute the phone. I started screaming. It was ridiculous. Fast forward a little bit more, and I have my technical interview. I feel like I absolutely bomb it. Like there was no way I was gonna get this job. I just felt horrible about myself. I was gonna have to go back to wrapping burritos. And at the end of the interview, the hiring manager at the time asked me like, well, I think we have some things to consider. Do you have anything that you want to leave us with? And that was like my 8 Mile moment. Now, like my back is against the wall. I need to push as hard as I possibly can. And what I said to him was, I know I'm far from your most qualified applicant, but I guarantee I'll outwork anybody on your team. And I ended up finding out a year later, after I was hired at NASA, that was the only reason why I was hired. Yeah, I remember asking my manager at the time, I was like, dude, I had no certifications, no degree. Why the hell did you pick me? And he goes, it's because of the grit you demonstrated at the end.
Yeah, that's interesting you mentioned that, because for our audience, the new hire or the people who are trying to get into the door, that's super important. And a lot of, like, my husband interviews a lot of, you know, the people for hire too. The thing that he mentions is that they're not necessarily looking for technically perfect people. Yeah. Especially for the new hire, they know that there's improvements to go, but you need to demonstrate how hard worker you are, how you're going to outperform the job that you are given, how much you're going to be proactive, and how can you improve yourself, willingness to improve yourself, and resilience to, you know, all those different situations. So it kind of aligns to how you PR'd yourself too. Yeah.
Have the ability and the desire to advocate for yourself, because nobody else is going to want it more for us than we do. So I have this huge chip on my shoulder, no degree, no certifications. As soon as I get my foot in the door, I had a little bit of waiting time because I was still waiting for my government clearance to complete. And at that point, I wouldn't have access to certain tools until at least my interim clearance was granted. So I just had to sit in a room for a couple months, and I had a couple options. I could just sit there and, you know, watch YouTube videos all day, or I could be productive with that time. I could use that chip on my shoulder. So that's what I did. Spent that first month locked in studying Security Plus. I passed it, and I was immediately like, what's the next one? And after all the research I had done online, I read that CISSP was the certification that had so much reputation behind it, so much credibility that it could lend me. And I figured, why not? So I went for CISSP with minimal experience in cybersecurity, only earned my Security Plus, no degree, and it was hell.
Yeah, without the experience, it can be difficult.
Yeah, it was awful. It ended up taking me like 6 months. I read the Cybex ISC guide, 700-page book twice, front to back. Didn't retain anything because I was just reading for the sake of reading without taking active notes. So that was a mistake that I made there. I was probably putting back like 2 coffees a day. Ended up becoming a huge caffeine fiend just because I was studying.
Yeah,
right. And I finally get to this place where I'm trying to find every possible way to maximize my intelligence or recall ability. I was taking all these supplements. I started learning I basically went to Costco and bought every supplement they had. I was like, is this gonna help me? Is this gonna make me smarter? Please, please, please. So I ended up taking my exam super jittery. So I was like, I had all these vitamins. I probably had the equivalent of 4 C4s, like the, is it C4, the energy drink? Or like 4 Red Bulls. I had the equivalent of 4.
Monsters, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was basically vibrating.
Yeah.
And to your point, it's important to not be nervous when you take these exams. So I was doing my best to breathe, but I was sweating because I don't know what was in me at that point. And I get to the place where I pass. And now that I'm remembering it, because it's been a while since I've thought about it, I remember exactly where I was. I remember the drive home, having the biggest smile on my face from the testing center. And it just felt like my life had changed. I reached back out to all my mentors at the time, and I thanked them for their presence in my life. And they were like, we knew you could do it. And I'm like, I didn't know I could do it, but I tried. So I just kept pushing this body of knowledge, and I'm seeing so much similarities between your own journey and your own approach to life and career, as well as my own. So this has been a really nice kindred spirit experience.
Right. I mean, I think the common factor is that don't stay still, sit. And if you have a time, well, even if you don't have a time, you can make the time if you're willing to be successful.
I hate hearing that excuse from someone. I don't have the time. I'm like, we have the same 24 hours.
Right.
You have the time, you're just not prioritizing it effectively.
Prioritizing and also be efficient. Because if you're efficient on anything, you can kind of compress the time that you spend on job task 1 and then be able to spend it on the other thing. But yeah, I mean, I think the common factor is that we both do not like to sit still and do not like to be told no, you can't do it. And that kind of drives us to move forward for the higher goal.
Yeah, there's something about being told no that excites me even more.
Right.
So
you told me no?
Yeah. I have this very visceral memory that has stuck with me for forever. And I have no idea why, but I think it all makes sense now. So I was maybe 6 years old, and there was this jar of olives that my auntie wanted open. And I was trying so hard to get it open. I just couldn't. I didn't have the grip strength, but I believed I could. And I remember my auntie coming over to me, and she's like, give me that. You're not strong enough. You can't do that. And I remember this. I was 6.
You're like...
way over 20 years ago. And this is something that stuck with me because I think that was the beginning of the forging of my identity. I did not like that. Not one bit. So it's funny to recall that.
Yeah, I mean, but one thing I think that's very important to distinct between like, if I put in effort, like I can be whoever I want, versus like I need to put an effort to be who I want to be. Because like I think here's a common theme, because I raised those two stepkids, is that in current culture or the mindset, like a lot of people just say, you know what, you can be whatever you want. But the fact is, if you do not put the amount of effort and the time and just dedication and motivations to be that person that you want to be, you'll be nobody. So
spot on.
Yeah, so I think that's the difference, is that maybe something that we need to continuously remind ourselves is that you may have a goal, but if you're not putting 200% or 300%, make it happen and suck it up, then you'll still be at where you're at.
Yeah, and I think a common misconception is that we aren't who we are today, like magically. We got here incrementally. One of my good friends in high school told me we should just be 1% a day. We should just be 1% a day better than we were yesterday. And by the end of the year, we're 37 times better, which is one of the core tenets of the book Atomic Habits, which I recommend to all my mentees. So I'm curious, are there any books that you feel like were formative to you forging this identity and mindset that you have?
For me, like, instead of like from reading the book, more it was from my experience, especially like going back to my military the experience. It doesn't have to be military, but it can be from like, maybe you work and you feel like you're stuck, and then try talking to a mentor like you know, it can be from experience and talking to other people. But reading wise, I like to read the sci-fi book. So not much a sci-fi book, you know, that teaches me how to be successful and put some motivation, but yeah.
Okay, so are you a Star Wars fan or a Star Trek fan?
I'm a Harry Potter fan.
Interesting.
Because back in the days, even at Cisco, like I would have the Harry Potter as a background, and I try not to take like super seriously about like just work or, you know, achieving things in life. It's like, it's just, I often tell my friends and family is that, you know what, if there is a Hogwarts, I would rather go Hogwarts and be a wizard and quit this commercial job and be free from all this money making.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's pros and cons to everything we do, right? Like you may trade in this corporate lifestyle for a magical wizardly world, but on that side of the fence, you got Voldemort trying to cut you down every single day.
Yeah, I mean, I did see some of the posts that you made on the LinkedIn with the recent, you know, the interview with Mike and the another person, is that the highlight of the work and life balance. So I think that's very important too, is that maybe to some people, the money or like the title that you have in the corporate job or non-corporate job is very important. But to me, it's like something that is given so that I can highlight my personal life with the family. So I think you should not like, because it's so hard to overcome when you experience a failure at work or some achievements that you're trying to get to. You need to always have the foundation, your family or your personal life. So
that's huge. I read somewhere recently that something that's not talked about often enough in terms of one of the things that can significantly improve our productivity and life satisfaction is to have a partner who believes in you. And I think that's so true. I think that's so true. Like our life is not just our own. We're like the aggregate of all the relationships that we built. And one of the greatest relationships we can have is the one that we have at home. Because when you have peace at home, at least this is my current belief, is that when you have peace at home, you can have limitless focus to really lock in and accomplish the goals that you really set your mind to. Would you say the same?
Yeah, I mean, keep your partner and keep your family happy. And yeah, I mean, one of the reason, I mean, I do go crazy on my certification, but I try to kind of pull myself and set the boundaries on not going too crazy on the work or my achievements is because family is first. So you need to be happy in your own personal life outside of the work or your degree or whatever you want to become, so that you can outperform at the work to earn the paycheck.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah, I think we have to be the best version of ourselves so that way we can be the best versions for other people.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important that you have a good foundation, and preferably, you know, the personal life and your family and friends be your foundation, and the work comes next. But that may be different for other people.
Yeah.
And also, I think it's very important. I've seen a lot of intelligent people out there, like a lot of smart people, thankfully, working in this job, like whether it's a leadership intelligent people or whether it's a technical intelligent people. But the ones that I always end up respecting the most is those who are very humble. I've seen some people, it's like, all the glory is on me, my achievements, I am smart, I'm unicorn. But I'm like, but I've seen smarter people than you. You know, so I think it's very important to be humble and acknowledge that all these achievements did not come from only from my effort, but from support from my foundation, my people, and the intelligence and the health that, you know, don't come for free.
Yeah.
It's the luck and blessings. So
that's spot on. I think people who are newer in career could really benefit from having a growth mindset in that you can always find opportunities to learn. The second you feel like you know everything, second you probably need to check yourself.
right.
But also there's that saying, like, if you're the smartest person in a room, you should find another room. Always find other people to test your mettle against. And I think it's important for people to understand, what is your intrinsic motivator? Are you someone who just loves to outwork the imposter syndrome? Or are you someone who loves to work competitively against somebody else? Like, find that way to derive inner motivation, because in your darkest days, you won't have much of that. So you'll need to find a way to kind of conjure external motivation, either through your support system, through your loved ones, your dog or your cat. So having that support system is huge. And the common denominator that I've seen in pretty much all the people I've interviewed with is that they are in long-term standing healthy relationships where they talk through things. They realize that there's compromise. Like, all this success and all this focus and passion comes at a cost. And oftentimes people unknowingly take their own partners for granted. So that's a topic for another time. What I'd love to dig into is, why did you decide to pursue the SANS master's degree? Because that is known as the most technical, the most difficult degree in cybersecurity.
Right. That was actually, so as I mentioned at the very beginning of the interview, I don't have a grand reason when I start something. It's just that if I start it, I know that I can be responsible for my decision, then I do not give up. So this SANS master stuff, so Mark Stevens, who is one of my mentors at the Cisco and a good friend of mine, and he already started, and he's like, hey, Q, you already have like 3 or 4, you know, the SANS like asserts, and why don't you do it? And I'm like, oh yeah, then let me work on the, you know, application. And I probably spent the day, like just a few hours on application, and then I submitted, and I'm like, well, it's on God. Like, if I get, I'm serious. I told my husband too, hey, I spent like a few, like maybe 2 hours on writing essay, and I submitted all the resume, and then it's up to God. Like, it's a God sign. If I get admitted, then I'll start it. And then I got admitted, and I'm like, okay, then I need to be responsible for my action. And thankfully, you know, if you are working at the corporate job, they do have the tuitions program. So my manager and, you know, the senior manager was very supportive of it. So that's why I continued on. But yeah, I mean, sometimes, like, I would like to highlight is that you do not have to have a grande reason or motivation to start something. You just got to stuck with it and then complete, like a marathon, just like your marathon story.
You gotta be willing to stick through it when it sucks really bad.
Right.
I think that's also another common denominator behind some of the most successful people I've ever met, is even when things are bad, even when the economy is bad, even when you've gotten your 100th rejection, that you keep going. And this is a muscle that we build up over time. And after enough no's, enough rejections, we know that with enough time, enough effort, someone's gonna say yes.
Yeah, and as a single, like as some new in career, you know, people may have, like as single as in not having the family or the kids, it's gonna be so much easier to just tap into things and just start,
Yeah.
stuck through it. But if you do have kids, like, it may be more difficult because, again, work and life, the balance, and you should be able to distribute the time, and there are so many other things that you need to consider. But yeah, as a new hire or the new in career,
Yeah.
there's just so much potential and opportunities if you just try.
If you just try.
Right.
Also, I think a big component of that is surrounding yourself with people who have the right mindset. I have noticed personally in my life that when I started surrounding myself with people who started saying, why not, as opposed to, that seems tough, everything changed. Like, what I thought I was capable completely changed. I saw one of my closest friends start a company that enabled me to sort of believe, hey, like, I've been having dinner with this guy for a year now, and we're just chopping it up, have a jolly good old time. If he can do it, why can't I? And then the third person in the friend group starts her own company. And now we're in this place where, like, we are committed to the learning and the grind of the experience. But I'm not sure if two of these companies would have been founded had the first person not started. And being surrounded by that conscious energy headed in the direction of where you want to go, I think that's been huge.
Influence, healthy influence.
Healthy influence, and also have the peace of mind to be able to gently let go of the influences who aren't necessarily
Right.
The best for you.
So what would you say, my question to you is that, how do you think that the people can find the right mentor for that type of right influence?
I've had many conversations about mentorship with my friends, and in most of my high-achieving friends, they have several mentors. And we're people who aren't afraid to ask for what we want. We realized a long time ago that closed mouths do not get fed. So it can be as simple as looking up someone on LinkedIn and cold emailing them and saying, hey, like, I like this about your resume. I'm doing this. This is what I'm trying to learn. Would you be willing to share 15 minutes of your time with me? I've gotten a couple mentors that way. Other mentors you pick up through, like, work. Like for your example, it would be Mark. They're people who are just close by, and you want to keep them close. I think there's only one shortcut through life, and that's mentors, because they get to consolidate decades of pain and misery and learning into teaching you or helping guide you to avoid the same mistakes that they did. Like, smart people learn from their own mistakes. Genius people learn from other people's mistakes. You don't need to repeat other people's mistakes. You can learn them. And ideally, you don't repeat your own mistakes, which I still do to this day, but I'm trying. So I think mentors are probably one of the best ways that people who are earlier in career can catapult their career, because these people can make introductions. These people can change your perspectives on things. These people can point you in the right direction when you're lost. And those things are so invaluable, especially at the beginning of your career. And mentors get a lot out of that too, right? Like, it feels so amazing to give back to someone and watch them grow. It's like watering a plant, right? They're a beautiful little sunflower that's now sprouting. So I'm very passionate about mentoring. I'm very passionate about student education. I'm on the board of the Silicon Valley ISSA as student education director. We recently stood up a student chapter at San Jose State, and I'd love to get to a place where we stand up student chapters at many other prominent colleges in the Bay Area. So Stanford, Cal, all the CSUs, San Francisco State. I'd love for us to have a cybersecurity presence, because our jobs are so damn interesting. I love what we do, and I feel like I can honestly say, like, I love cybersecurity. Our jobs are so cool. There's limitless, infinite potential to learn. And you can make a pretty penny doing so if you're willing to be committed to embrace the suck and push through when things are hard. So that's how I'd recommend going about finding mentors. Also, there's one book which breaks down everything that I just mentioned, and it's called Mastery by, might be Rob Greene, but he also does the book 48 Laws of Power. So it's a very captivating narrative that is capped off with the lesson that you should have learned from that chapter. So thank you for asking.
Yeah, I mean, it's, to your point, mentorship is like the easiest way, but I think one more thing that I would like to add on to that is that just because you have a mentor doesn't mean that they're going to get you a job. So you need to put an effort.
Right. Yeah, it's not a given.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we're just like very lucky to have a job like in the field of cybersecurity. And to your point, I don't know how else it can be boring or not loving job. Like there are just so many things that you can do, not underrating like a network engineering, but cybersecurity can be pen testing, it can be analytic stuff, and it can be the solutions architects, and there are just so many different variations that you can explore.
Yeah.
And because it's so dynamic, I don't know how else someone can not love it, you know?
I'd recommend this field for anybody who likes solving puzzles. I'd recommend this field for anybody who is interested in like the bleeding edge of technology. I know AI is capturing a lot of the space right now, but there's a security component to that too. I took the AI Security Essentials course from SANS where they walk through like AI poisoning and how if you have your data sets and your models poisoned, you can significantly impact and manipulate people at scale, which is crazy to think about, but it's really, really interesting. Then we have the whole ransomware component. I did a little bit of incident response consulting for a little while, and it's crazy, Kyu, to speak to someone whose organization was just wrecked by ransomware. It's terrifying. I've got many stories about that, but I'd love to hear from your perspective, like, what has the experience been like pursuing the SANS Masters? Has the last couple of years just been a blur for you?
It's been about 2 years, and actually since I found out that I'm pregnant, I've been cracking down one course like within a month. Like, so good thing about the master's or the bachelor's program, SANS actually has a bachelor's program too, is that it's totally up to your own pace. So it's up to your dedication, time, and intelligence level, obviously, the capacity. So there are times that they were challenging, but even, for example, the recent course that I completed was a net worth the course that it's like a capture the flag. So I actually spent about 3 days of knocking out to complete with the A, not because I'm smart, because I was very persistent. I'm like, I am not getting out of this like a task, my to-do list, until I complete this. So yeah, I mean, it's been pretty smooth sailing as long as you put the effort and mindset and dedication and motivation in your own timeline.
Yeah. I'm not surprised to hear you say that. It's a common theme that I've been hearing through this. Like, it's not that bad. You just got to try harder.
It's like, make time and just be persistent. Yeah.
That's true. That's so true. Yeah. Where do you think you get your courage from? Is that something that was innate or something that you had to grow?
So I think courage is a little bit different from the imposter syndrome. I acknowledge that I have an imposter syndrome. Courage is something that you get from the self-confidence that you can do it. When you, like I said, throughout the whole interview, make the time if you feel like you don't have a time. When somebody says no, you can really do it. Do not really believe what other people like put you into that little small scope of what you are capable of. So have that self-confidence that you're a hard worker, and then courage will come from there, I feel like.
Yeah, I recently spoke to a really high-powered leader, and he was willing to give us some advice on how to continue growing Astro. And he said, say what you're gonna do, but do what you said you do. And when you continually get reps and reps and reps of doing what you said you would do, you start believing that whatever you say you're going to do, you're going to end up doing. So that's a way to sort of build your own internal confidence. For you, how do you feel like you build your own confidence, either in your skill set or in your day-to-day?
I think more of just like how you mentioned it, I put my mind into it. I don't have like real big reason of starting anything. But once I started, I put my time and effort and motivations and everything that I got to achieve it. And the repetition of that behavior and the habit has become my self-confidence. When I do something, when I commit to something, I know I can do it. So it kind of aligns with what you mentioned, is that make it your habit of what you say that you're going to do and make it happen.
Yeah, it's all habit building. I learned a long time ago that we only have a finite amount of willpower on a day-to-day basis. So a way that you can extend what little willpower you have or use more effectively is to take the things that are hard, that require a lot of that, and automate them. Like build them into your habits so that way you don't have to think twice about them. So going to the gym consistently, going on 3 6-mile hikes like you do all the time. For someone who doesn't walk, they might think a 3-mile hike is like a staggeringly difficult task. But at this point, you do that in your sleep, right? That's an example of like building the habits that will propel your health.
And do not quit. Do not quit once you started.
Yeah, do not quit. Be resilient, see something through. So now I want to get into a few things that I ask every single one of my guests. One of them is, what's the greatest piece of professional advice you've ever received and how has it impacted you?
Just do it.
Nike, hell yeah.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, just do it. And I think that's the one that I've heard from military actually early on, because I started Army ROTC when I was in college, is, again, just do it. Even if the situation sucks and even if it feels like it's impossible, and sometimes it doesn't feel right, but when you have a mission and when you have a mission that you need to accomplish, then just do it, no matter what the circumstances. And once you put your mind into it, you're capable of doing it. So
yeah, action drives change, but inaction doesn't.
Right.
I love that one.
Thank you, Nike.
Thank you, Nike. Your ad and marketing team is too good. It's burned into our psyches at this point.
Right.
So the next question I want to ask is, what do you feel like are the qualities of someone, or what do you feel like are the qualities that are required to be developed for someone to thrive in your role as a cybersecurity solutions architect?
Oh, I say this often to my husband, that if I am a manager and have to hire someone, I will look for a few things. Number one is that, how quick can you learn? Because with especially at Cisco, we are branching on very different types of cybersecurity, the protection systems, is that there's no way that you can know everything. Like, you cannot have the configuration guide and all the specs in your brain for 40, 50 different products. So you need to be able to first know how to search and learn, understand, and comprehension skill sets. So that's a number one thing. And number two is that what a hard worker you are, is that how are you going to prove that? And number three is that what type of good team member you are, the teamwork that you value, what the teamwork means to you. Because at the end of the day, as the people progress through their career, they will realize that your performance and your achievement at the work is not often just your accomplishment. It's because there are so many people that you were able to tap on as a resources and as someone who can teach you, guide you in the right way. So you being able to contribute to the team and the team being able to help you on, the teamwork is very essential. So I'll be highlighting that teamwork capability as, one of the most important things.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you mind sharing some salary ranges that someone might find either as a network engineering intern or as an entry-level SOC analyst, and then maybe as a security solutions architect?
I think it really depends. So as a SOC analyst, it's not really about the type of role, but more of the grade and then comes a role that adds a salary range. But I believe at the corporate America as a SOC analyst, you start from maybe 50 to 60 on the K range, I believe. I'm not sure about the contractor. And then I think as a system engineer, you can easily start from 80K. And then I believe you can go up to, depends on where you live and depends on your experience level and depends on what grade level you are, can probably go up to 300K if I am correct.
Yeah, and with commission, technically your earning potential is uncapped.
Right.
Depending on the structure of the comp plan or accelerators that you might have.
Right.
So it can be a very lucrative role, but comes with a lot of stressors.
Oh yeah.
Comes with a lot of pressure. To be able to balance a high stress role that has a lot of visibility too, with studying for a SANS degree, I think to me is really, really impressive. Borderline absurd. But I have a huge amount of respect for it because I have 3 of these certifications, and they were 3 of the toughest periods of my life from like a purely intensive study perspective. But I wouldn't trade that in for anything. I think the time that we spend investing in ourselves is the best possible time to be spent. We've got to be the best version of ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, for me, all those SANS certifications, they're actually in the closet in the box. I didn't even hang it on. And I told my husband like recently that, yeah, I mean, it was difficult, but it's not like, you know, it was just a tool to expand my knowledge. I'm very grateful that I had a capacity to get it and do it well on each of the exams, and that I have this many certifications, but it's not something that I brag about or that I am like super proud of myself. It's just at the end of the day, it's gonna be the tool to perform well at your job and execute your knowledge on the cybersecurity. And it's just gonna be, you know, the thing on the resume. So
yeah. And ultimately, family comes first for you.
Right. Yes.
I love that. So what would you say is the craziest story that you have from the industry? It could, for me, it's the Stuxnet worm. I've talked about that a million times. I love how crazy it is, the complexity, the implications that it had on like global politics, but also how that sort of started this next like age of cyber war, complex zero-day chaining, spinning ICS fans like with an nth of a degree, so that way they destroy themselves from the inside. That's what I would say is the craziest story I've ever had. But if you have a favorite bug that you'd like to share, or if you have just your favorite security architect story, do you have one?
Not necessarily the favorite, like a cybersecurity incident story, but if just a recent, you know, the memories going back a few years in the cybersecurity architect days, there were times that when everyone was going crazy because of the SolarWinds. Every time something that big happens, all corporates, including the Cisco, the security vendors, are object to the investigation, since we're the one who's providing the protections for our customers. And the another one is a CrowdStrike, you know, the blue screen. So yeah, I mean, I must say that whenever those type of big things like happen that affects big number of customers, then you know how we get busy. The cybersecurity architect, we're the one that we get in and then try to seek the opportunities within the customer space. Say, hey, I see that this is an issue. Is there anything that we can help with? Or it's something that we need to provide to the customer that we're not compromised and, you know, everything's good. So, I mean, besides that, I think it's just, you know, cybersecurity, there's always something. My customers will get hit with the ransomware here and there. And there's some incident response, like a stuff going on and priority one case going on. That's just a part of life as a security architect that you got to deal with every day. It's nothing special.
Yeah, you get to see so much. Honestly, it's an incredible role to be a security architect. Right. But I'd love to double down on what you mentioned. And this is actually one of my favorite lines from Ismael Valenzuela's Sec 530 course, like defensible security architecture. As a security architect, you will never know everything. And you need to get comfortable with relying on other security architects who have domain expertise within their realm. So for me, that would be extended detection response and SecOps, ransomware triage. That's what I would kind of hang my hat on. And there are things like inspecting network logs, which I'm just not as terrific at as maybe someone who has the GNFA cert might be. And I think that's kind of an analog for life. Like, nobody knows everything. Be humble, keep your head down, and remember, you can achieve whatever you want.
And I think, to your point, is that successful people oftentimes is not because they're super rock star on everything, but because they're also able to know what resources they can rely on. So utilizations of the resource, efficiency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd love to close with hearing about something that you're excited for. This could be personally, professionally, and if there's anything that you'd like to share to like promote, would also love to open up the floor for you here.
Just exciting stuff is that, I'm pregnant with my first baby. And that's been an interesting journey of me trying to meet all my deadlines for the work stuff. Since I'm a cybersecurity architect, that all the deals that I've been working on, whether it's been 2 years or short terms, trying to close it before I go on a maternity leave, and the master's too, on my last 2 courses. So it's trying to close that as well, and all the professional achievements that I would like to accomplish that I won't be able to do for at least the 1 year since the baby's birth. So yeah, I mean, that's exciting and the brand new things that I'll be experiencing in my life.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, Kyu, thank you so much for sharing the time and sharing your mindset. It's been awesome to see like the analogs and the parallels between how you approach life and how I approach life. And I wish you the best on this next journey into what might be the best role of your life, and that's as a mother. So we have a tradition here on KO's Corner podcast where we close every episode with a handshake that I do with all my close friends. And I'm sure this is pretty popular in the military, but it's called a DAP. So you just put your hand up and then...
It's like that? Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Ready? Okay, one more time. It has to clap. All right, ready? Oh, yep. Perfect.
Okay, got it.
Thanks for tuning in to KO's Launchpad, where cybersecurity meets opportunity. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others on their cybersecurity journey. Stay curious and keep charting your course to success. Until next time.